So my name is Elizabeth Warson, and I'm located in northern Colorado, and that's Fort Collins, Colorado. And I work on two different ranches up here. So I'm an equine-assisted psychotherapist in addition to being an expressive arts therapist. I incorporate expressive art making with just all my horse work, whether it's, sometimes it's combining EMDR, eye movement desensitization, reprocessing, tapping on the horse, or we can do other forms of just tapping in the arena, and then doing response artwork to that experience. Sometimes before we go in to meet with that particular horse, we'll do some, focus work in terms of intention, maybe shifting cognitions, those sorts of things, and just being aware of that. But we'll do some art making around that. Sometimes people just want to let things go and they want to be with the horse and just, focus on self-regulation, but also let things go. And that's when I'll bring in clay, for instance, and we'll make clay pots with the horse, just right there in the paddock. And it's kind of challenging to do to do art making in a paddock with a horse because they're so curious. And I've done felt making, painting, clay work, you name it, with horses, and you kind of have to balance their curiosity with the process. But we're able to do that with these let it go bowls. And so they bring in a hand-sized clay and create their own bowl and visualize what they like to put in to that bowl to let go. And then we kind of put it far away from the horse, because sometimes the horse comes back and says, what is that? I'm going to get really curious about this clay now. Yeah, it's based on my 2006 research with Indigenous communities looking at healing circles with predominantly cancer survivors. So I've revised it to be a restorative practice that also integrates a visual journaling process. So we're going to be incorporating breath work, a little bit of movement, and things that sort of complement just the focus of this conference. So my focus with visual journaling is in terms of health promotion, and I like to combine visual, written, and spoken narratives, and just combining those practices into something that's more dynamic. And so it's just not a traditional journaling process. I think it's really helpful in terms of stress reduction, just looking at health promotion. We've discovered that it helps with immunity, lowering anxiety, even negative affect. I don't really incorporate a trauma focus from I guess, a top-down perspective, but rather a bottom-up. So we're, integrating things that incorporate sensory awareness, breath work, etc., versus working with a cognitive framework. I will say I was really inspired by the work that my graduate student, Amanda Mercer, did back in, I believe it was 2006. And so she chose a very interesting population, and that is second-year medical students, because they had high levels of stress. So that's in the research or in the literature review. And then we didn't use directives. We didn't prompt them in any way. It was a very open-ended approach, but we were using specific measures such as the positive negative affect schedule, and then also the Beck anxiety inventory. And we noticed significant changes. We had a statistician on board as well, and we published our research, but we did notice changes. What we were anticipating, though, was an increase in positive affect, but that didn't happen. It was just a decrease in negative affect and a decrease in anxious behaviors. So that spurred a lot of the work that I've done especially in terms of cancer education since about 2006, and incorporating visual journaling as a way to decrease anxious thoughts, to help people ground themselves, and then also just look at some of the things that emerged. And we found that, especially with the Indigenous communities that I work with, there was a mindfulness component, and they were looking at present moment experiences and also their connection with nature with this particular community. So those are some positive findings that have come out of just some of the research I've done. But I love incorporating visual journaling in all the work that I do, whether it's a retreat, whether it's a group, or even research. It's just a great way to kind of look at what kind of effect some of these different art-based or expressive therapy interventions are having on the individuals. And a lot of communities would say fellowship around meeting as a community and engaging in the art making process that then becomes a story sharing, moment or experience. So it's very different. It's inspired a lot of the work that I've done in non-Indigenous communities and bringing in those aspects of story sharing or the storying process. In addition to just working with the art materials a little differently. So maybe not providing like 100 million different choices, but rather, thinking about just a few art supplies that might be, relevant to that community. And that kind of ties back to just a lot of the dissertation work that I did around situating. So I really spend a lot of time in the community piloting out different interventions, doing a lot of interviews, et cetera, before I even bring in those supplies. And then once I'm, in that sort of like a workshop type experience, about 3 hours or so, then I'm able to get additional feedback from the participants. So it's definitely a process. It's not something you just kind of, move into, and you have to have the connection with the community. You have to engage in your own reflexive practice so that you're not coming in with your with a bias or things along those lines. So it's it took me 6 months just to prep for my first workshop. That's something I just walked into.